You're aboard a plane, cruising 33,000 feet above the Earth. The drone of the engines is a soothing hum. Passengers are tucked away in their seats, and everything seems normal. But in an instant, it all changes. Without warning, an explosion rips through the cabin, and what was once a peaceful flight turns into a horrifying freefall. This might sound like a scene from a Hollywood thriller, but for Vesna Vulović, this nightmare became her reality on January 26, 1972. JAT Yugoslav Airlines. Flight 367 was supposed to be a routine trip from Stockholm to Belgrade with a stop in Copenhagen, but instead of touching down safely, it became the stage for one of the most extraordinary survival stories ever told. Vesna didn't just survive a plane crash, she survived the impossible. So how did a flight attendant, with no parachute, no ejection seat, and no special training, live through an explosion that disintegrated the plane around her? Let's take a step back. It's a cold winter day in January 1972, and Vesna Vulović, a 22-year-old flight attendant, is eager to board Flight 367. This wasn't even supposed to be her shift. She had been mistakenly assigned to the flight due to another Vesna on the crew roster. But instead of declining, she took it as a stroke of luck. Little did she know, fate had something much darker in store. Flight 367 was a McDonnell Douglas DC-9 aircraft, a plane that had seen its fair share of successful trips. The journey itself was meant to be routine, Stockholm to Belgrade with a quick stopover in Copenhagen. For Vesna, it was just another workday in the skies, greeting passengers, ensuring safety, and serving meals. The passengers on board, a mix of business travelers, tourists, and families, all with no idea of what was to come. As the plane ascended into the clear skies, everything seemed perfectly normal. The pilots, Ludwik Razdri and Radomir Vujicic, had everything under control, and the crew went about their duties. At this point, no one could have predicted the tragedy that would soon unfold. Now imagine this. The plane was at its cruising altitude, tens of thousands of feet above the Earth, far from any immediate help. It was flying over a region that had seen rising tensions, as the political climate in Europe during the early 1970s was far from stable. What no one on board knew was that a bomb had been placed in the luggage compartment, set to detonate mid-flight. Who planted the bomb? Why did they do it? These questions would remain shrouded in mystery, but the bomb itself, that would go off without warning. At 33,000 feet, the cabin of Flight 367 was calm and serene. The sky stretched endlessly outside the windows, with nothing to suggest that disaster was just seconds away. Then, in a flash, everything changed. At precisely 4:01 p.m., an explosion ripped through the aircraft. The bomb, hidden in the cargo hold, detonated with a force that instantly tore the DC-9 into pieces. The pressure in the cabin dropped catastrophically, and passengers were thrown from their seats as the plane disintegrated around them. The explosion was so powerful that debris from the wreckage was scattered across a wide area, covering miles of the Czechoslovakian countryside. For most, this was the end. The violent rupture of the plane left no chance for survival. The crew in the cockpit never had time to react, and the passengers were hurled into the freezing sky. But amidst the chaos, one section of the plane, part of the tail to be exact, fell in such a way that it preserved a pocket of air. In this section was Vesna Vulović. Trapped in the tail of the aircraft, Vesna plummeted 33,000 feet to the ground. To put that in perspective, that's a drop from the cruising altitude of a commercial jetliner, almost 10 kilometers in freefall. But somehow, incredibly, her descent was slowed. As the tail section hurtled toward the Earth, it struck the snow-covered slopes of a mountainside. The snow, thick and heavy from the winter storms, cushioned the impact just enough to keep Vesna alive. When rescuers arrived at the scene, they could hardly believe their eyes. Among the shattered remains of Flight 367, amidst the debris and the bodies, lay Vesna Vulović, alive, but barely. Her body was broken. She had a fractured skull, broken legs, and 3 crushed vertebrae, leaving her temporarily paralyzed, but she was breathing. Despite the overwhelming odds, she had survived. How did Vesna manage to live through such an unimaginable fall? Was it pure luck, a freak accident, or something more? You see, at that altitude, the fall alone was enough to kill. Temperatures at 33,000 feet are freezing, oxygen levels are dangerously low, and the sheer force of falling through the atmosphere at terminal velocity should have made survival impossible. But Vesna's fate was different. As the tail section descended, spinning violently, Vesna remained trapped inside the wreckage, unconscious, It's believed that her unconsciousness, ironically, may have helped her survive. Her body, limp and unresponsive, avoided the tension and resistance that usually lead to fatal injuries in such falls. Rather than brace herself for impact, which could have caused her muscles to tear and bones to snap, her unconscious state allowed her to roll with the motion of the crash. The wreckage fell over a dense, snow-covered mountain range in what is now the Czech Republic. The tail section, where Vesna was, collided with the thick snow. Miraculously, the snow acted as a cushion, absorbing a significant amount of the impact. Even so, the force of the crash was overwhelming. Vesna suffered extensive injuries: a fractured skull, 2 broken legs, 3 broken vertebrae that temporarily left her paralyzed, and a shattered pelvis. Despite this, she was alive, a fact that would later stun even the most seasoned experts in aviation safety. Vesna's fall from 33,000 feet holds the record for the highest altitude a human has ever survived without a parachute. The odds of such survival are astronomical. She had defied gravity, nature, and death itself, but her ordeal was far from over. The freezing temperatures on the mountainside and her critical condition meant that survival now depended on how quickly rescuers could reach her. The crash site, high in the snow-covered mountains of Czechoslovakia, was remote and difficult to access. Villagers from the nearby town of Srbska Kamenica were the first to respond to the disaster. Among them was a local woodsman, Bruno Henke, who initially had no idea anyone could have survived such devastation. As he combed through the debris, he came upon Vesna, still alive but barely clinging to life. Her body was battered, her face was swollen beyond recognition, and she was bleeding profusely. Henke, a World War II medic, acted quickly, providing first aid and stabilizing her as best as he could. He had seen the aftermath of brutal conflicts before, but nothing like this. He didn't expect Vesna to make it, but his immediate actions likely saved her life. Vesna was rushed to a nearby hospital where her injuries were assessed. She was in critical condition, and doctors were unsure if she would ever regain consciousness. For days, her fate remained uncertain. She slipped in and out of a coma, her body fighting to recover from the near-fatal trauma. Yet, against all odds, she began to improve. Months of painful rehabilitation followed. Vesna had to relearn how to walk, how to move, and even how to live with the physical and emotional scars of the crash. Her temporary paralysis eventually subsided, but the road to recovery was long and grueling. Throughout it all, she never gave up. Vesna would later credit much of her survival to the love and support of her family and medical team. By some miracle, Vesna's injuries healed, and she did what most people considered impossible. She returned to a normal life. In fact, Vesna never allowed the crash to define her. She returned to work for JAT Airlines, though this time on the ground as a national hero, remembered not only for surviving the fall, but for her resilience afterward. But her story has baffled scientists, aviation experts, and survival specialists for decades. While many theories have emerged, the truth is that Vesna's survival was a rare combination of factors, each of which played a crucial role. Firstly, Vesna was positioned in the tail of the plane, which, according to aviation experts, is one of the more survivable sections during a crash. In many plane accidents, those seated at the rear have slightly better odds of surviving due to the structural design of the aircraft. The tail section, in Vesna's case, remained somewhat intact as it fell, and this likely helped shield her from the full brunt of the explosion. Another factor was the way Vesna fell. As mentioned earlier, she was unconscious during the fall, which paradoxically helped her body avoid some of the severe trauma that comes from bracing for impact. In survival studies, it's known that unconscious or relaxed individuals sometimes fare better in high-impact situations, like how a drunk driver might walk away from a crash unscathed, while others suffer major injuries. Vesna's limp body allowed the force of the impact to be distributed across her entire frame, rather than concentrated in specific areas, which reduced the likelihood of instantly fatal injuries. Then there was the snow. It's not just any snow that cushioned Vesna's fall, but thick, densely packed snow on a mountain slope. It provided a natural buffer that absorbed much of the energy from her fall, softening the landing, much like how falling into water is less harmful than falling onto solid ground. Without that snow, the outcome would have likely been very different. There are also theories that suggest Vesna's overall physical condition played a part. At 22, she was in good health, physically fit and resilient, attributes that may have given her body the strength it needed to endure the shock and trauma. The cold temperatures may have also slowed down her body's metabolism and internal bleeding, helping her survive long enough for rescuers to reach her. Yet beyond the science and the theories, many believe there was an element of luck, pure, unexplainable luck, that played a role in Vesna's survival. After all, everything had to go perfectly wrong for her to survive. The way the tail section fell, the conditions of the snow, and even her being on that flight in the first place due to a scheduling error. It's no wonder that her story continues to fascinate and inspire people to this day. As with any extraordinary event, Vesna's miraculous survival did not come without its share of mysteries and controversies. For years, the official story was clear. Vesna Vulović survived a terrorist bombing that caused the mid-air explosion of Flight 367. But in the 1990s, a shocking new theory emerged, casting doubt on the widely accepted version of events. In 2009, two investigative journalists from Prague published a report suggesting that the story of the explosion and Vesna's fall might not have happened the way it was originally told. According to their investigation, Flight 367 may not have exploded at 33,000 feet, but instead at a much lower altitude, possibly under 10,000 feet. The report proposed that the plane had been mistakenly shot down by the Czechoslovakian military and that Vesna survived a fall from a much lower height, which would be more plausible. This new theory sparked a wave of controversy. Some questioned the credibility of the report, while others pointed out inconsistencies in the official investigation. Why had no definitive evidence of the bombing been found? How had Vesna been the only survivor? And why had the official report been accepted so quickly? These unanswered questions led many to speculate that there was more to the story than initially thought. However, Vesna herself never supported these alternative theories. Until her death in 2016, she stood by the official version of events. She maintained that she had no memory of the crash, but trusted the investigators who had pieced together the details. For her, it didn't matter whether she had fallen from 33,000 feet or 10,000. The fact that she had survived at all was what mattered. To Vesna, focusing on these conspiracy theories only distracted from the true message of her story: survival against all odds. While the mystery surrounding the exact details of the crash persists, what remains undeniable is the sheer improbability of Vesna's survival. In 1985, Vesna was awarded a place in the Guinness World Records for surviving the longest fall without a parachute, an honor she accepted with pride, though she often joked that she wished it had been for something else, perhaps something less painful. What do you think? Was Vesna simply the luckiest person alive, or was there more to her miraculous survival? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe in the official story, or do you think there's more to the mystery of Flight 367?